But why should we be bothered with the story of a young Australian journalist who died almost 100 years ago, however fine his writing, however exotic his love life, however poignant the circumstances of his death? I say lots of reasons. At one stage I wanted to the title of this book to be Phillip Schuler, The Lost Voice of Anzac. I was quickly overruled. Those who know better advised that there was serious Anzac fatigue in the book trade. 2 years into the centenary of Anzac, we are indeed awash with military history titles. Fair enough. My compromise was to name this lunch, The Lost Voice of Anzac. And I am delighted that this didn't preclude a full house today. At the heart of the book is the political battle that was fought just as tenaciously as the military contest over the future of the Gallipoli campaign. The argument about whether to evacuate or to stay and fight after the disastrous offensive of August 1915 was fiercely contested before Britain's embattled Asquith government decided to quit. The popular perception in Australia is that Gallipoli was a disaster from the outset and that the lives of brave Australian soldiers were squandered in a hopeless cause by callous and incompetent British generals. That was the thesis embraced by Keith Murdoch, who, after a brief stopover at Gallipoli on his way to a desk job in London, wrote an explosive letter to Prime Minister Andrew Fisher that fuelled the Quit Gallipoli campaign. Another common assumption is that all journalists covering the campaign railed against oppressive censorship, had no respect for the generals, and formed a cheer squad behind Keith Murdoch and British correspondent Ellis Ashmead Bartlett in their political campaign to have General Sir Ian Hamilton sacked and the Dardanelles expedition aborted. In fact, Phillip Schuler had immense respect for Hamilton, with whom he built a close relationship. He was not opposed to or unduly constrained by censorship, and he believed that evacuation was a terrible mistake. He was convinced that had the British government held its nerve and sent the necessary reinforcements and munitions, the Allies would have broken through in early 1916, captured Constantinople, and helped shorten the war. Schuler had been a close friend of Keith Murdoch. They started together as cadets at the age, shared close mutual friendships, and for a while lived together. But Schuler was furious with Murdoch's intriguing at Gallipoli, and their relationship never recovered. One of the great what-ifs of the Schuler story is what impact might he have had on Australia's perceptions of Gallipoli had he lived to argue his corner, as Murdoch, Charles Bean and the others did. Instead, the great tragedy was that he died of wounds a few days after fighting gallantly at the Battle of Messines, just shy of his 28th birthday. I believe Phillip Schuler needs to be better known and celebrated as one of the important lost voices of the First World War. I hope my book will serve that end. The great tragedy of the abandonment of the Gallipoli campaign is that the Australian troops were not rescued from danger, the outcome Keith Murdoch was convinced would be the dividend of his agitation. Instead, they were dispatched to a far more perilous killing field on the Western Front. And because their gallant reputations preceded them, they were earmarked for some of the toughest and deadliest fighting in France and Belgium. Today, as we know, is the 100th anniversary of the ending of the Battle of Fromelles. In just 24 hours, there were 5,533 casualties from the Australian 5th Division, almost 2,000 of them killed. In one day, almost a quarter of the total Australian death toll from 8 months fighting at Gallipoli, lest we forget.